Welcome back to session 5 in our Methods and Tactics course in the No Man Left Behind self-paced training. I'm David Delk, and I'm here with Charles Cooper, Brett Klimmer, and Pat Morley. In the last session, we looked at how do we get a spiritually stuck man moving by providing value for him. And so in this session, we want to say, okay, well, what's next? We've got him going. What are we going to do now? We want to talk about how do we capture that momentum. And guys, I'm wondering, why do you think capturing momentum is A, why is it so important as a philosophy or an idea in ministry? And then second of all, why is it sometimes so difficult for churches to actually do?
Well, why don't I take the why it's a difficult part? And basically, we try to get the men to do too much. So you've all been driving a car before and accidentally shift from first gear to fourth gear. What happens? You know, it bogs down, tries to stall out, and you just lose the momentum. And so it's very important to have an appropriate gear, be in the right gear with the guys and not try to do too much. Make sense?
Yeah, you know, another thing is that you go to all the trouble of getting a guy moving, of getting him to take another step forward. If you don't capture that momentum that you've created, you've just wasted all that energy. And frankly, you've wasted the opportunity. There's a tremendous opportunity cost. You know, a guy's only going to take so many first steps. And so if you don't capture the momentum from those first steps, you know, you're just wasting a lot of time and effort.
You know, as a pastor, most of this just makes so much sense to me. I suppose it's because I've been on the other side so long. You know, for years, it was all about getting people to the event. It was all about getting people there. Everything we did was to just get people there. And I can remember some huge things that we did and gave no thought about what was supposed to happen afterwards.
Right.
At all. I mean, they came, it was great. But come on. Really, Pastor, I mean, you know, be honest. I mean, we really do want to sustain all of that effort and that energy, and this is really what we're talking about. Having that next step, making sure that you're giving the guy something to do after he comes to your big event.
Great. You know, and that is so important because if we're going to go to all this effort to do these events and activities, which we all do in our churches, it makes sense to just add a little bit more time and energy to make sure that we are providing a believable next step for our men. So that's what we're going to look at in this session as we learn about capturing momentum by giving men the right next step.
Well, welcome back. We're here for session 5 in the No Man Left Behind self-paced training, the Methods and Tactics course, course 2. And it's great to see you guys back with us. The last session we talked about creating momentum by providing value. And if you remember at the beginning of that session, I showed you a graph, a chart that looked like a roller coaster. And we talked about, based on the distance between those peaks, can tell you what, if you're having some kind of an issue with your men's ministry, if it's going up and down, the distance between the peaks can tell you what the cause is. And if those peaks are far apart, say years apart, you probably have had a dynamic leader that's come and then left. And so without a good succession plan and a good leadership development plan, you've gone back into a valley again. But if those peaks are close together, say months apart, you probably have an event-driven ministry to men going on in your church. And the answer to the event-driven ministry in your church is to really implement the create, capture, sustain cycle to help you overcome what we call maybe a blippy men's ministry, a roller coaster men's ministry. And so the create, capture, sustain cycle will help you do that. And so when you're creating value, creating momentum by creating value, you're looking at the types of men that you have in your church, and you're asking yourself, what will be valuable to these men? What's the language that I need to speak to these men in so that I can express the gospel to them? And so we talked about looking at guys' felt needs based on where they are on their spiritual journey, using that as the hook to get them in to speak into their lives with the gospel. So once you've gotten a guy engaged, maybe he came to a barbecue or he came to a men's retreat or he just went out to coffee with you just to talk and get to know him a little bit, how do you sustain that momentum, or how do you capture that momentum that you've created in this man's journey? That's the focus of this session, capturing momentum with the right next step. And so here's that chart that we spoke about with the different distances between the peaks in your men's ministry effectiveness. So the capture step helps us answer the question, once we've gotten a guy engaged, once we've gotten him involved, how do we keep that momentum going? How do we capture that momentum? And so the capture momentum step solves the problem of the event-driven ministry to men, or the Blippy ministry, the Blippy men's ministry. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to think about engaging him in some kind of a second gear, some kind of a second step. And so we want to provide an opportunity that makes sense for him, going from the activity that he was engaged in to begin with and keeping him moving along. And so we want to look for appropriate next steps, probably going to be short-term next steps. Whatever we're asking him to do after we've created the momentum is that it needs to be believable. It needs to be achievable. Something that a guy that's sitting at lunch with you or at coffee with you and you ask him to do the next thing in his walk, maybe you're asking him to join a small group that you're in. Well, does that make sense? Would it make sense for him to go from having coffee with you to joining your small group? If you think, you know what, I don't really think that I've gotten enough of a relationship with this guy yet, or I'm realizing that this guy's real early in his spiritual journey, and my small group is doing a verse-by-verse study of the book of James, that might not be a good next step for that guy, so that wouldn't be an appropriate capture step. But if I've got some guys at a big men's barbecue, and I'm promoting maybe a mission trip that we have coming up, maybe 4 or 5 months in the future, well, from a men's barbecue to a mission trip might not be an appropriate next step, but maybe at the men's barbecue we can recruit some guys to help out on a local service project. Maybe there's some families in the church that need some repairs done to their house, some single moms, or maybe there's a Habitat for Humanity house project that you're going to be involved in. And so you say, hey, we just need some guys to sign up for 1 4-hour shift in the next month. That would be an appropriate next step from the men's barbecue to get guys to maybe sign up for a project like that. So how do you make this happen? Well, the big thing is that when a guy comes to one of your activities or engages with you in some way, and you're asking him to take the next step, the biggest key is that before he leaves, he already knows what he's doing next. You're getting an on-site commitment from him that now you've come to this, now this is the next step. Now, that means that on next Saturday at 8 o'clock until noon, you're going to come to this address and you're going to help out for 4 hours at the Habitat House. And you've got his name and he knows that you expect him, and he walks out of that interaction or that activity and he knows what his next step is. One of the biggest mistakes that we make, I think, when we are doing this when we create value, is that we get guys all excited and then we don't show him what the next step is. We might mention it. We might say, hey, isn't this great that we went to this big rally and we're all excited? Hey, there's some small groups in our church. You should join them. That's great. But it doesn't work. We were at an event once. Someone from Man in the Mirror was at an event once, and they did a great job on the event, and they had done these events in the past. They had the guys sit there and listen to a great speaker over the course of a weekend. And then they said, we do this all the time, and we always promote our small groups. And we tell the guys, join the small groups. But we've got the same number of guys in small groups for several years now. We get a whole bunch more men to come out to our big events, but we just can't make the translation into the small groups. And so he said, well, how are you getting guys into the small groups? What's the process that you're using? And I said, it's really great. In the back of the room, we put up sheets of paper on the wall. And on the top of each sheet of paper, it says who the small group sponsor is, when they meet, where they meet, and how many spots they have open in their group. And then we invite guys. We actually have a time that's reserved for this. We ask the guys to get up and go to the back of the room and find a list and put their name on the list. Well, the problem with that is, there's a couple problems with that. First of all, the first problem is if you put a list up on the wall and I don't know the guy at the top of that list, I'm not signing up for his group. I want to know the guy, at least meet him before I get involved in his group. Secondly, if you tell me that this group meets at this place at this time and there's 2 spots left, well, that means that there's 4 or 5 other guys that are already in that group. I don't know how long they've been meeting. I don't know how well they know each other. I don't know. I don't have enough information to make me feel comfortable to walk into that setting on my own for the first time and just feel like I'm the odd man out. So we do these Man in the Mirror seminars at local churches, and we do You come in and do, for instance, a Rewired seminar. And so we know the target group that's going to come to a Rewired seminar. It's going to be guys that are cultural Christians just inside the church, maybe some biblical Christians, but they're guys that maybe have sort of been around for a while and they're feeling a little stale, you know. And we use the big idea, you know, Christianity is not about behavior modification, it's about heart transformation. And so we have a great weekend with the guys. And the moment they walk in, when the speaker first stands up, one of the first things that we say is, guys, the biggest benefit to this weekend is not going to happen on the weekend. Because towards the end of this weekend, we're going to give you an opportunity to get involved in a 6-week follow-up group. Now, why do we call it that? 6 weeks, because it's a short-term commitment, nice and easy. And a follow-up group, not a what? Not a Bible study and not a small group, because guys have in their heads what it means to be in a Bible study or a small group. And what it means is people getting in my stuff. It means I have to be like, some guys feel like a small group means that like day one I got to sit in there and I got to start confessing sins and next thing I'm going to be, you know, crying and stuff like that. And I don't want to do that, right? A follow-up group. Well, follow-up means that it's based on what I've already just learned in this weekend. So that makes sense. That makes sense to me to go to that next. And then we hold up the book that they're going to use. And we say, all right, here's the follow-up book. Here's the book that we're going to use. There's no homework. You don't have to prepare. Just bring this book. And you know what their favorite thing about this book is? Right? And they look at it and they go, well, it's colorful and it's got pictures of guys on it, not women and men walking hand in hand into the sunset, you know. So, and it's got, you know, kind of cool pictures in it and colorful, and it's thin. And I don't have to do anything, I just have to show up. And a guy thinks, I could do that. I could do that. Because, you know, think about it. They wouldn't be at the event in the first place if they weren't interested in some kind of spiritual thing. I mean, they're at an event in your church. So they know, if you're thinking about the wide, deep continuum, you know, they're far enough along that they've got some kind of spiritual interest, but the level of spiritual interest they have dictates what the best kind of capture step that we offer to them is. So you never want to have any kind of a create value. You don't want to take a guy to breakfast. You don't want to invite a guy to a barbecue. You don't want to have a men's seminar or a men's retreat. You don't want to do anything that creates momentum if you're not ready to show men what the right next step is. It's like, you know, being in Florida in the middle of the summertime and turning on the air conditioning and then throwing the windows open. It just doesn't make any sense. You're going to do all that work to create some interest, and then you're just going to let guys go and not do anything to capture their interest, to capture the momentum, to channel them into that next step.
It really wasn't long after I started teaching seminars for Man in the Mirror that I discovered that the most important thing that was going to happen on the weekend was getting men committed to small groups. During those seminars, we try to convince each man attending that he needs to get in a 6-week follow-up. I became utterly convinced of the cruciality of that and made it my business to get every man that attended a seminar that I was teaching to sign up for those 6-week follow-up. And I got very creative about how I would do that, up to and including asking them to lie to me if they had to make that initial commitment. Because I wanted each one of them to experience what I knew would be life-changing if I could just get them to do it. To make the commitment to attend a 6-week follow-up based on what we had talked about on the Friday night and Saturday morning. And those men, even though many of them knew their lives are so busy and there's so many things going on, to know what's going to be happening over the next 6 months, come on. To know what's going to be happening over the next 6 weeks, come on. They knew that that was not possible, but at least they were willing to make that commitment. This is one of the benefits of what we practice in terms of what we're preaching, that it really is about the follow-up. It really is about that next step. It really is about letting a man know what's next for him if, in fact, God touches his heart in a radical way at one of our seminars. I think they'll be impactful for you. If you've never tried one, I think you want to try one. I think you're going to see the benefit and the long-term benefits of having a man plugged into a 6-week follow-up.
When we get guys into those follow-up groups in the seminars, what we do is we actually have each leader, we've recruited the leaders ahead of time. We've worked with the church to recruit the leaders ahead of time. The speaker will then meet with the leaders before we do the actual group assembly time, and we'll just tell the guys, first of all, we tell them, you can do this. Secondly, we tell them, the material's all done. You're not a teacher. You're just a shepherd. So just, your job is to help every guy get some airtime every week and to gather the guys together. Your job is not to, get out your commentaries and study the material ahead of time. Just, guys don't like that. They don't like to be in groups with know-it-alls. So just be a shepherd. Help the guys get airtime. And then the third thing we have them do is we have them stand up right where they are, and they say, my name's John. My group's going to meet at the coffee shop on the corner of 5th and Main at 6 o'clock on Tuesday mornings. And then the next guy stands up and says, my name's Victor, and my group's going to meet at the church on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock. And the next guy stands up and says, my name's Rick. My group's going to meet at my house on Saturday mornings at 7:30 a.m. And where your house is. And then, so all the guys are standing up, and then I look at all the guys and I say, all right, guys, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pick one of those groups, one of those follow-up groups. Even if you're not going to be able to do it, just humor me and pick a group. And then they do what this group is doing right now. They sit there and they stare at me. They do. And I go, no, stand up and go to one of these groups. And for 5, maybe for 3 minutes, it is chaos, okay? Guys are going all over the place. They're like, when was your group meeting? When was your group meeting? 4 guys are heading towards the bathroom to hide out during this time so that they don't have to do it. And I go and I sort of head towards the door and, hey, where are you guys going, And then after about 3 minutes, you look around, and all around the room, there's all these new groups that have just established themselves for 6 weeks. I tell the leaders, just pass a piece of paper around, get everybody's name, phone number, and email address. And then remember we talked about in the Create Value session, we talked about personal invitations. So I say, what I want you to do? I want you to re-invite them. The night, 1 or 2 nights before your group meets, I want you to call every guy on the phone. If you can't get to see him face to face, then call every guy on the phone and say, hey, this is Rick. Remember we met on Saturday at the Success That Matters seminar at church, and I just want to remind you that tomorrow morning at my house at 7:30 we're going to meet for our first follow-up group meeting. I'm really looking forward to seeing you there. Are you going to be there? Now a guy's got to say no if he's not going to be there, right? But more importantly than that, he's had another personal contact, another person asking him, hey, I want you to come to this. I want you to be a part of this. And guys like that. Guys like to be invited. And so when I talk to the churches afterwards, the churches that do it the way we suggest that they do it, they have great results in getting guys into the groups. When we do it this way, the way I just described to you, 70% of the guys will sign up for a follow-up group. 70%. It's just great results. And then they'll even get guys from out that couldn't make it to the event. Some of the group leaders often will recruit other guys to join those groups as well. So it's a brand new group. A brand new group helps because everybody's in the same boat together. It's short term, 6 weeks. It's based on the topics that we were talking about. So it's an appropriate next step, and it's believable because they've got this book that's this nice second gear material. It's thin. There's no homework, so it pushes it towards the left side of the continuum, and it gives the guy a picture in his mind. I can do this. I can do this. Any other questions? Brian, tell us how this Create Capture combination has worked well for an event in your church.
We have an annual retreat that our church has been doing for years, and we took and decided one year to do the capture phase. We had already done the Create, and we had guys going, but we were doing nothing with them when they came back. excuse me, so we took and we developed some studies that were based around the event that we were going to, and we got guys that were agreed ahead of time to lead the studies. We assigned them as leaders during the retreat to develop the relationships intentionally during the retreat. We had a meeting the last night of the retreat, got guys to commit to the follow-up, and when we got back from the retreat, we actually had all but about 2 or 3 of the guys that went, and we had 55 guys go that signed up and actually followed up and went to the capture momentum piece, the follow-up at the back end.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great stuff, huh?
What is the most prevalent type of event for men in most churches? Well, it would have to be the monthly breakfast. Now, this is somewhat ironic because while a monthly breakfast is one of the easiest events to put on, or any kind of monthly event is an easy event to put on, it actually is the most difficult to make work in the context of your ministry to men. Now, why is that? Well, let's think about some of the principles we're learning in this course. One thing is, it happens too frequently for you to make it seem like a really, really big deal that's going to create a lot of value for the men. In other words, it's pretty hard to say every month, everybody really needs to be here. This is going to be the greatest thing ever, right? I mean, guys just are going to stop listening to you at some point. And then another thing that would cause guys to stick, we've talked about, is relationships. And so think about it. If you're going to something weekly and you're sitting at a table with some guys, well, you start to hear about this guy's father who was in the hospital for bypass surgery, or their son that was having some difficulty at school, or whatever it is. There's a context, there's a relationship that starts to grow. And so you start to look forward to going to see that person every week, those guys every week. However, when you have a monthly activity or event, those relationships don't really have a chance to form because it's just too infrequent. Guys are sitting in different places, they're sitting with different people, and so those relationships don't become the glue. So if you absolutely have to do monthly events, how can you make them part of this process? How can you make them part of capturing momentum? How can you make them create value for the guys? Well, one thing we would suggest is to give it some kind of annual theme, to make those monthly activities connect to one another so that it looks like if I go to all of these 8, 10, 12, however many it is, activities or events, then this is what I'm going to accomplish. I'm going to learn these skills. I'm going to understand these biblical principles, whatever it is. But it's not just some kind of random activities scattered throughout the year. And then also you can tie it to other significant activities or thrusts of your church. So for example, if you have a big fall outreach festival where you do service projects for the poor in the community or something like this, then perhaps your meeting that you have with your men before that is really a preparation time for this big emphasis that your church is about to do. Again, the thing you're communicating to the men is this has a point. There's a reason why we're gathering for this monthly meeting because we need to prepare as men for this big initiative that our church is about to do. So you're communicating purpose, you're communicating vision, and you're connecting those events to one another so that it seems like there's a reason why a man would want to be involved.
There's an exercise for you to do just to sort of write this a little bit more in your mind in your workbooks here, and it's a create capture combination. So what I want you to do is just brainstorm just for a few minutes at your tables. Go ahead and brainstorm what are some good create and capture combinations. So if you're going to have a barbecue, what's the next step that you would offer? If you're going to have a seminar, what's a good next step that you can offer? So just take a few minutes, brainstorm, maybe just at your tables, do this with the guys. It doesn't have to be something that you're actually going to do. It's really more just to get the creative juices flowing and come up with some ideas, okay? So go ahead and do that now.
Well, I know it's old hat by now. At the end of session 5 in your methods and tactics workbooks, you've got some discussion questions. And hopefully they're going to be something that will help your team process the information that you've just heard. And then in your activity planning section, you're going to work on the sheet that you started in the last session, and you're going to fill out the portion of that sheet that corresponds to session 5. What we're going to begin to do in this session is ask the question, where are the men coming from? that are going to be involved in this ministry activity opportunity, and where would we want to send them out to. We're going to start thinking about what kind of leaders we need to connect with, what do we need to do to draw those men into this ministry opportunity, and then from there, how will we connect them to a believable next step to something else that's going to be happening in the life of our church.